If we can come to order for the Finance Committee meeting of December 20th. We'll have a roll call vote first, please.
Mr. Lear.
Present.
Mr. Lejas. Mr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Olthoff.
Present.
Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. Byrne.
Present.
Ms. Weber.
Present.
Mr. Payton.
Present.
Ms. Parker.
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Present.
Mr. Zenz.
Present.
Ms. Haas.
Present.
Mr. Swanson.
Present.
Ms. DiColo. Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
Mr. Searoy.
Present.
We have a quorum.
We have one request for a public comment. Jake Lee.
Good morning. Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and guests. Just want to rise on behalf of those who elected me to represent them as their county auditor. And I'd like to call your attention to the line in the agenda that says that the cash bonus mandated by the auditor to be paid out to the auditor's office employee. Now, while this line is a marketing genius, I will say, it's alarmist and it's misleading. My email actually stated in the subject line, FY18 payroll expenditure request. That's the key word. And I say, Joanne, good morning. This email is to serve as documentation that I intend, keyword, to pay out what is remaining in my budget, key phrase, to my chief deputy. And then I go on to explain why I'm sending the email from an accounting standpoint and that type of thing. So I would like to point out that, number one, this is my budget. Okay, and as an elected official, I can spend my budget as I deem appropriate if it is ethical and if it is legal. No other elected official has been put on blast, I'll say, or micromanaged in this regard like our county board chairman has micromanaged me. There very well may not be anything left in my budget, so there won't even be an issue because more than likely it's all going to be gone anyway. Thirdly, there is no mandate for anything. And frankly, a simple no would have sufficed rather than trying to embarrass me in a meeting as what it appears to be. Let me note that it appears that the chairman has a history of picking and choosing the law and directing others to do the same. My employee, who's a woman and is a credentialed CPA who's highly qualified to do her job, assists me in executing my statutory duties, powers, and functions, most of which are impeded by this administration and the appointed finance director, frankly. And to the extent that there's compensation involved, my employee and I actually combined make less than many of the people in this county. Such a disparity obviously poses risks to the county as you look at things like the Ledbetter Act and other issues. And my desire was to close the income gap, albeit by a couple of $100s at best. I would suggest that our human resource director look into this issue and see if it exists throughout the rest of the county. However, I'm not going to leave things unnoted. The chairman rightfully stated that my predecessor actually violated a union contract and doled out thousands of dollars in doing so to an employee that was neither credentialed nor degreed to the extent that my employee is. But I have to ask, what is the difference between my predecessor who did it and me? What is the difference between the other countywide elected officials and me? Because they're not micromanaged the way I am, nor are their statutory duties, powers, and functions infringed upon day in and day out. Why is it that I was forced to move my office to another floor? Why is it that there was an illegal meeting held plotting against me for hours last year? Why is it that my desire to close the income gap disparity was met with such resistance? Why is it that it appears our current county board chairman is hell-bent on trying to embarrass me and thereby discrediting the important work that we do for the citizens of Kankakee County? Let me say that further on the agenda, it shows that the chairman is calling for an outside auditor to audit our credit card transactions, which I enthusiastically embrace and accept. I actually would go a step further and I would commend the chairman for giving me the idea that we need to expand the scope of this audit And I think that instead of being subjective in the audit, we need to be objective, and we need to have a forensic audit of the entire county. To that end, I have already contacted many forensic accounting firms asking for an RFQ to demonstrate their level of interest and their capabilities. The outside auditors, I believe, should be completely independent, free from conducting business with the county in the past 5 years. And I would like to invite the chairman and hopefully even the state's attorney to join me in coordinating and promoting this forensic audit of the entire county. We'll start with my office. We'll learn best practices, and we'll learn all it is that they have to contribute to our office. We'll go to human resources, to finance, accounting, payroll, decentralized accounts, and all other areas of county finance and county operations. Because ultimately, that is the highest form of accountability and transparency we can provide to the voters. So I embrace the idea of an audit. I really hope that the chairman will join me and that we will do a forensic audit of the entire county. I stand by the good work that we have done in the auditor's office. I really appreciate Marcia Easter, who serves as our chief deputy, who is compensated well below her qualifications. Actually, to the extent much less than my predecessor compensated a non-credentialed, non-degreed employee. So on behalf of the chairman, and frankly, the administration, I'd like to publicly apologize to Marcia for not being able to compensate her to the degree in which she is worth. With that, I thank you for your time. With malice toward none and charity for all, I would like to wish this entire body a happy and safe holiday season. I appreciate the ability to address you today.
Are there any other public comments? If there are no other public comments, I'd like to move to a presentation. We have an item on the agenda for the Route 50 corridor proposal. Mr. Richard Hancock is available to make a short presentation on that. Mr. Hancock, if you want to use that or if you want to come up front, whatever you're more comfortable.
I won't make everybody crane their neck. I'll come around the bend right here.
That would be fine.
Good morning. My name is Rick Hitchcock. I'm president of Hitchcock Design Group. We are landscape architects and planners with offices in Naperville, Chicago, Indianapolis, and Austin, Texas. You may recognize the name. We have been working over the last couple of years on the Kankakee Riverfront, although that's not the subject of the discussion this morning. We have submitted a proposal at the chairman's request, really at the request of CSL Behring and through the assistance of Mike Gingrich. I was approached, I don't know, I want to say back in the summer. You are all, of course, very aware that CSL Behring is making an enormous investment along the Route 50 corridor, which is going to be hugely beneficial for the county and the municipalities that are adjacent to it. Our firm was approached to explore the potential of the corridor. It's a very short stretch from north up into the interchange, but the idea is that the CSL executives are keenly interested in trying to create a better gateway to this entire community, and they see this as an opportunity to, frankly, to help them attract and retain very skillful employees. In order to kind of get the ball rolling, they ask us to, through the chairman, Mike, and CSL, kind of a group effort, they ask us to put together a proposal to do a study of that corridor, which might ordinarily be tens of thousands of dollars. We put something together for $25,000 that we call an opportunity analysis. I don't know if you have that packet of information in front of you, but we have a three-part proposal. The first part is called the opportunity analysis. The second part is a preferred strategy, and the last part is a final master plan. The $25,000 is to do the opportunity analysis, which is really about getting our arms around all of the physical resources, which include the road network, the land uses, all of the infrastructure in the area. The second piece is to get our arms around the stakeholder interests. And of course, in this case, it includes elected officials like the chairman and like yourselves. It includes property owners, it includes tenants, and certainly to some extent, a lesser extent in this case, it includes citizen interests. And to be sure, the elephant in the room here is the property owner, CSL Behring, what their interests are in the area. So it's to talk in great detail with those folks, talk with bankers, lenders, brokers, will be very important, developers, to get our arms around what are the universe of possibilities in this area. And then lastly, there's these three dimensions that we're trying to find the intersection of, which is resources, stakeholder interests, and lastly, what's the marketplace going to support in this area? We all know, we read this every day, we hear this on the radio, retail is changing really forever. And so what kinds of retail uses along that corridor might be legitimate in the future? What other kinds of business or commercial uses might be useful in the future? Are there residential opportunities in the future? All of those kinds of things will be explored. We have a market expert on our team and a branding expert on our team. Once we get past that piece of the assignment, we're going to conduct what is often called a charrette, which is fancy term for a workshop. We're going to have a day-long workshop. I'm not exactly sure where we're going to have it, but somewhere in the vicinity. And we're going to put a lot of ideas on the wall, and we'll run those past a kind of a task force of folks who I expect will include folks from CSL, certainly the chairman of this board, and maybe some elected officials. We'll run it past them and see if we're on the right track. And if it looks like we're on the right track, we'll package that in a small report, and we'll be done with that first phase. Sorry, that was kind of a windy explanation, but if you ask a consultant what time it is, like your last consultant, they'll tell you how to build a watch. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. We really appreciate the opportunity. As you all know, this is a very, very special time for Kankakee County. There are some spectacular things going on, and this is just a little tiny piece of it, and we feel like it's a great privilege to be able to participate in that. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify that the $25,000 is not something we have to vote on, because this is enterprise zone money that's already been voted on by that board. So that is an online account with the county that goes through planning. We put it online because that's where it needs to be. And so that check would come from there, and it's not general fund money. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to vote on this here per se. That vote has already happened at the enterprise zone. I just want to make the board aware in case if it showed up on a claims report, because it seems that things get picked and choosed what they're going to be talked about at times for various reasons. So that is not county money.
Mr. Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The import of this presentation was for purposes of stating that a professional group is being considered to be hired by the by tax increment financing. Is that the decision that this board is looking at? I'm not certain what I understand what I just heard.
No, I think as the chairman explained, this is money that is not coming out of the general fund, but it will go through our books, and so the board members and the finance committee needed to know that this was in fact something that explained what was taking place.
So who chose to hire this professional service as opposed to XYZ professional service?
Mr. Chairman?
We would be the hiring entity, but the funding is coming from the enterprise zone. We just hold the money for the enterprise zone and manage it, because our staff are the ones who actually run the meetings, staff the enterprise zone meetings. So that started under Mr. Van Mill years and years ago. So
my question is, how was this particular professional service chosen as opposed to XYZ? Was there a committee that met and decided this was the best presentation?
Money that's spent by
It was the enterprise zone who chose this in consult with CSL, and because you work with CSL and have been talking about this, this was the correct entity. That's what's driving it. Those were the stakeholders at the table. It was CSL and the mayors that surround that are all part of the enterprise zone. And actually, all the mayors in the area or their representatives are part of the enterprise zone as well.
So
We did not select them. Yes.
Okay, that's really what I'm getting to. So
Yeah.
this company has been vetted by a responsible group of individuals. And on that basis, we're being presented this professional service agreement because there will be a pass-through of dollars.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Is there anything else you have, Mr. Heath?
No, thank you very much. It's going to be a great project. Look forward to giving you an update as we get farther along in it. Have a really wonderful holiday. Thank you.
We have minutes in front of us for August 29th, September 26th, October 24th, and October 28th. There are some minor Scribner corrections that need to be made on the October 24th agenda in terms of the last page, and a correction that Ms. Haas would be the one abstaining from voting rather than the October 24th here. Rather than the we, it'll be Ms. Haas. So that's singular. Also, in the November 28th, on page 3, the motion was to approve the interfund borrowing resolution with the date specified as December 4th. December 3rd. Yeah, December 3rd. Mr. Chairman?
I'll make the motion with those corrections to accept those minutes.
All right, the motion by Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Zinn seconds. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, we move to the Treasurer's Office. Mr. Afghano? All right, morning.
Morning. This will be a drama-free presentation. I'm sure you all appreciate that. Mr. Oldtoff said, I don't know that. That's true. I maybe spoke too soon. First, something I didn't plan on talking about, but I just want to mention that I spent 4 years working in the legislature, and if you ask 99.9 people in Springfield who the finest lobbyist is in Illinois, Al Ronan would be everybody's first choice. So Al's well known. I was in Springfield when Al was 5 years into his practice. What was that? Oh, no. I'm not that young, George. But he's incredible. And I can only imagine with Governor Pritzker coming in and the supermajorities that the Democrats have in both houses. What he didn't tell anybody either is that after he retired from the legislature, his sister took over for many more years. So he's well known. So I highly I support that highly. So I just want to say that. Now for my office. Final distribution happened yesterday into today. So people will see stuff hitting their accounts today. We're finishing up interest payments as well today, which be done before the afternoon. So that will close out our tax year. I thought this year, looking back, was fairly successful in terms of the way we collected and distributed taxes. We were a little bit late on this distribution, later than I would have liked to have been, but we had some software issues that we worked through, and we're gonna get the money out. Like I said, today, it should be in people's accounts. I'm really, really excited to announce officially that we are going to start a program, which will probably start, and the date's moving right now, but maybe the 8th of January, whatever that Monday is, called Choices, TPP. And what that stands for is Choices Tax Payment Program. And that's what I alluded to last time I was here. You'll be able to set up weekly, monthly, daily, bi-monthly, bi-weekly, however you want to pay your taxes, you'll be able to set that up online. And you'll get a note emailed to you that says, by the way, Mr. Kinzinger, your taxes are scheduled to be taken out of your account in 3 days. Is that still what you want to do? If you say yes, it will take it out. If you say no, it won't. The next payment that comes around, it will recalculate what you now need to pay to meet that schedule you've laid out. And we'll ask you again, do you want to pay? When tax bills get rolled into the system, in the beginning, you will be, it will be predicated upon last year's bill, right? We know there's probably a slight increase. Some people's may go down a hair. So the system, as soon as that rolls into the system, it will recalculate. So it will say, hey, listen, we've been predicating your payments for these 8 times on this amount, but your new tax bill is actually $30 higher. So it's going to be $12 more each payment. And let you know that. And again, you'll have the chance to do it. So for those that are savvy electronically, and want to chunk their payments out, this will be phenomenal. It'll also put money into the county's coffers earlier. Tax rates, as you know, there's a dual sided tax rates or interest rates. And I think there was another quarter-point hike. But for my side of the fence, in terms of investing, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the taxing bodies. Now, what do you do with those people that aren't internet savvy? Well, they will be able to come into our office and do the same thing that anybody can do online. So if Mrs. Jones wants to come in once a week, she's welcome to. Once a month, twice a month, every day, however she wants to pay or he wants to pay, it'll be available to them. The caveat to the whole program, the most important thing, is that by first installment, you will have to have paid equal to your first installment due. By second installment, you will have to have paid your second installment. But I think what it does is it helps everybody across the board. First, it helps people that have no trouble paying their taxes, but want something that's more technologically advanced, right? Something comes right out of their checking account. It'll cost $1 for the payment to an e-check. If you pay credit card, I'm happy to report that the fee went down from 2.35 to 2.25. We negotiated that, and that was key to the deal. It's not a huge savings, but it went down. I like that. You'll be able to pay that way if you choose. For economically disadvantaged people, I believe this is incredible. They may not have access to a computer or the internet, but they certainly can still come in. You don't have to have a standard payment. You can come in February on the 15th or when you get your tax check and put that money on your taxes. So it's, you know, it's a Christmas club for taxes, I suppose, in some ways. But I want to relate a real life example. I had a woman, elderly woman, come last year, and I apologize if I've already told this story. And they owed $1,600. She owed $1,600, and she said, "I can't pay my taxes, but I can pay $1,200." And of course, based on what our deal was, I said, "I'm sorry, we can't accept that." So her taxes didn't get paid, and they got sold. And now she was paying 18.5% or 18% interest every 6 months on $1,600. In the same scenario, she would have come in and said, "Listen, this is all I can pay, $1,200." We would have taken the money, and she would pay 18% on $400. It's a huge deal. because what happens is in a situation like that, the people get buried and they never get an opportunity to get back to square one, right? And we don't want them out of their houses. We don't want people out of their houses. It does the county no good. We want to work within the legal framework that we're bound by, but keep people in their homes and make sense to the community. You know, and these houses that are going to tax sale, and then that Joseph Meyer, our trustee, gets on our behalf, you know, then we sell at a trustee auction for $650. It makes all the sense in the world to try to create a situation whereby people can pay these taxes. And I know we all probably feel the same way. The taxes for most people are a fairly large burden. But I think the whole idea from the day I got here is what are the best options for the taxpayer? And, you know, I've said a million times, my father would say you save your money and you pay your first payment, and you save your money and you pay your second payment. Well, that's great in a perfect world, but we don't live in that perfect world, and people have lots of things that come and go. And, you know, maybe you hit a lottery ticket for $300 and you want to walk in and put that on your taxes. And we shouldn't be in the business of not accepting people's money. And so I'm excited. It is, there's going to be some challenges, I'm sure, with anything new. Education will be the key. I'm certainly willing to come to anybody if you have community organization meetings. I've already contacted the mayor of Kankakee to ask to speak at the meeting in early January. I have been to some community meetings in the 2nd Ward, and Mary Crest, I think, is 7th Ward. I've been there, and I will go back there, and I will meet with anybody in the county who wants to meet to talk about it. And I will, of course, prevail upon the Journal, the Herald, the radio stations to get the word out, because it will take some time, and we're trying hard to get this done right at January to give people the most time. But I assume we'll work out the bugs this year, and next year it'll be you know, running perfectly smooth. We've had a 4-payment plan. This will essentially get rid of that. It'll pull it all together, and we don't have to mail anything. We'll own an email list that we can talk to people about. I couldn't be more excited. So and this is probably what y'all like to hear the most: zero cost to the county, zero cost. And it will be more work for my staff at times, but that work, I believe, will be offset by less work at other times. So if someone's paying online, they're not coming in, right? So banks will still collect on the first payment and second payment. They will have nothing to do with this multiple payment program, right? So if you go to the bank, you're still going to have to pay what's on your bill. You'll be able to print your bill off this year for the first time ever online. So if you lose your bill, you don't want to pay a duplicate bill fee, you can go on the internet, print your bill, has a barcode, bring it in, we'll scan it. You'll be able to do that at the banks as well. But there are some nuances, so we're going to have to talk to people about it. The banks will be here, and I welcome anybody to join on January 10th in the 2nd floor conference room. We are going to meet with them to explain to them the differences in collecting this year in this new system. And a component of this system is escrow payments, which will allow the banks to function much more efficiently. And in fact, we're reaching out to the largest landlords, parcel owners, people with multiple parcels. There's a component to this database where you'll be able to go and set up your own account and have all your properties listed with a database of all the history on them. And you want to pay them, you want to pay that one, or you want to pay them all, however you want to do it. And I think the charge is 75 cents per payment, right? So if you got 30 and you pay all at once, it costs you 75 cents for that opportunity. So there's some great tools for people in the area too. So we're gonna reach out to those multiple parcel holders and get them involved. Gosh, you can tell I'm a little excited.
Mr. Seawright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nick, this is a fabulous program, and I commend you and your office staff for taking this on. It not only is it going to help the taxee, it's going to help the county receive more money and get money money into our coffer quicker than to refuse it. And I'm gonna reach out to Ken and Dave over here in the side. You guys got to help us get this word out to the public, because this is great news from the treasurer's standpoint, that he's going to help people pay their taxes when they can afford to pay their taxes, not always when it's time to pay your taxes. So I appreciate that, and hopefully these men on the side will help you get that word out, because not everybody always watches this presentation. So Nick, kudos to you and your office. Thank you for looking out for the people in the Kankakee County.
I appreciate that, Mr. Seroy. I do want to note that when we have the banks here, the woman who represents the software company that is the backbone to this program will also be here. So you're welcome to come down at 9 o'clock, have a donut, have some coffee. Who's paying for it? Listen, I don't worry about that. I got bigger fish to fry than coffee and donuts.
Mr. Washington?
Nick, I want to commend you as well. To me, this is a perfect example of us as public servants serving the public.
Thank you.
Rather than working against the public.
Thank you, George. I appreciate that. I know it's corny. Andy, and you know, I say this, I'm sure this goes for all of us in this room. I'm from here. I grew up 6 blocks from here. I love my community. We had some people in here yesterday. It really is a privilege to serve people. I guess I don't have ambition, which makes it a little bit more comfortable. I don't want to be anything other than a treasurer. But we should work with people. And yeah, it's a little bit more work. I mean, when you bring this to the staff and, you know, but I have a phenomenal staff. And Shakira Parker Banks, Diane Spade, and Angelica Moore, who do phenomenal work. And they couldn't be more supportive. So we're going to advertise a little bit. I'm going to spend a little bit of my budget on advertising, which is something probably hasn't been done. But for $1,000, we can probably do a ton on Facebook and other things. But we're going to have to get out and talk to people, and I'm going to really rely on a lot of people in this room to help me, because I think that it's going to keep people in their homes. And let me tell you something. The tax, no offense to tax buyers, but when we get to that point, it's like when they say you get to court, no one wins at court. No one wins with the tax buyer. You know, we lose. The only person that wins is the tax buyer. The taxpayer loses. I mean, there are laws, we have to follow them, but that we're working for the people, and I appreciate it. And I won't. I'll take any more questions on this.
Mr. Kissinger?
I think you've done a good job, but I've been trained differently. And my training is that if you pay cash up front, there should be some reward. Money has value.
I wish there were.
There's no advantage to paying.
There is not.
You can't even get the 75 cents waived.
Correct.
How about reducing the fees for the credit card?
You know, here's the reason why you can't. And as a private person, as someone in private business, I couldn't agree with you more, and it's very frustrating. The law is very simple, right? It says you owe $10 and you have to pay it, and there's a fee attached to pay it by credit card, and this county is not absorbing that fee. The state says that's against the law. You pay us the $10 you owe us. You pay it early, it's $10. You pay it late, it's 10 plus. And if there's a fee associated, that's the number one issue in my office, Ron, is we say the fee does not come to the county. We don't get the fee. The fee is some. Listen, I run an online business as well. The credit card companies are doing wonderfully. Wonderfully. They're the only ones, I think, that make money. But
Right. You have the county treasurer's report, the county collector's report, and the monthly resolutions for January 2019 in front of you. Do I have a motion to combine and approve those? Mr. Washington moves, Mr. Altoff seconds. Any discussion on the reports? We want to go there. Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I just would like to close with this. To clarify what was done in the past, I believe before I started, my office, an office on the second floor, and Jake's office previously, which are all collectively bargained agreements, all paid bonuses. I'm against that, and I made that known. I provide Christmas gifts to my employees, but they come out of my pocket. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year, and thanks everybody in this room for your support.
We'll move on to the Finance Department. Mr. McCarty. You have some handouts that are being distributed to you. You have the, let's see. Yeah. The handouts, I guess, are already in the packet. There's being distributed to some others. All right, we've got the financial reports open first for discussion. Mr. McCarty, do you have anything you want to comment first?
Yeah, good morning and welcome to all the new members to finance. Just some overview, take a minute to discuss how it evolved for these particular reports. We, over the years and through our toughest times, these revenue items had showed some of the most volatility through those times, and so we evolved to look at them monthly with as much breakdown, particularly with sales tax, that we could to watch the trend. And as we went through with the program that the city of Kankakee had when it stopped, and the whole Supreme Court decision, all of those, and then watching the flow to come to what would our new normal actually be. This information, is what we relied on and continue to look at. It also was connected to our cash flow situation with items with income tax and others. The state has been, and fortunately right now they are current with our payments, but we were out as far as 6-7 months at sometimes with some of these collection amounts as well. So it affected our cash flow dramatically as well. So just a little bit of overview. Feel free to ask any questions. Sometimes it's kind of like watching the stock market. There's times where it goes up, and there's, although I'd love to be able to explain every single thing, when you break down our sales tax, there's a lot of categories that go into the split between the incorporated and unincorporated portions. So not everything is explainable at times, but it is trending higher as far as sales tax, and really all of them are trending higher. The only one that we expected was our personal property replacement tax. It actually, the original amounts that we were warned that it could change was in the 24% category of decrease, and we did have a decrease, but not to that extent with our PPRT amount. So that's just a highlight for those that are new, and a little bit of a trip back memory lane for those that have been on here, gone through this.
Are there any questions on the financial reports?
No, they're just for FYI.
All right, if there are no questions on the financial reports, we'll move to the TWAs and future cash flow update.
Mr. Wheeler, do you want to give a highlight of our TW conversation? We'll go into the details.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we started this process, 2-3 months ago, was when we first sat down with the banks, started going over what the discussion would be here. Let me just hold those for a minute. In the past, I think this board remembers when we got 4 million, then it was supposed to go to 3 and to 2 and to 1 and then done. because of the state of the finances in the county. Are the banks that would work with us, which were only local banks, all outside of the area banks would even return our letters for proposal. We were just above, we were in speculative on our bond rating, just above junk bond. And so we were not, even though the tax money was guaranteed, we're not the kind of customer that people that have board of directors would want to do business with. So thank goodness our local banks stepped up and they helped us through that time period, but they didn't want to be an enabling situation. They wanted to see a positive change within the county because obviously those folks live here as well. You know, that's not their core business, is to prop up government. It's to loan money for houses and businesses and things like that. So thank goodness they stuck with us. And so our conversations have turned from, you know, can we extend it another year? You know, because $1 million really at that time when we had those conversations, it's not a whole lot. That's a payroll. You know, that didn't get us through. So we were supposed to be this year, I believe, at the 1 million level. I believe this was going to be the one, and then next year was done. Through the positive turnaround that has happened here, and the fact that we will be out of debt, looks like around April, May, June of next year. We're still in debt now, general funds underwater. We will shortly be out of that situation. So they decided to stick with us with the $2.5 million TAW. That's money for when taxes aren't coming in. And as you may, people that have been on finance over the past few years, we've gone since 16, we've gone from borrowing it, I want to say December, and then to January, and then to February, you know, and said this, we may not need it until March this year. And our payables have gone from 3 million down to 800,000 roughly, you know, to 300,000. Our vendors are getting paid. And so there's been a dramatic turn and the banks notice that, and the terms have not necessarily changed. We still pay interest on that money. We still have to interfund borrow, but it's not to the extent that we have to, and we have to borrow less for a shorter amount of time. So this $2.5 million has been tentatively agreed on. While we only have a 1-year deal in front of us now, this 2.5 for the next few years will allow us to pay highway back and allow us to potentially be out of this borrowing situation on TAWs. You know, we potentially could be out of it, and that's the next page, and Steve can talk more about it. We look like we might be done in 23 with you know, TAWs, which is a big step for us. We thought it was going to be 20 years that we would need this. Just so you know, when we have a surplus in the general fund, it means that we need $5 or $6 million to get us till the next tax cycle. So we're really borrowing from ourselves at that point. We need a surplus so we don't have to go out and have access to capital. So until we have that, we will still need TAWs, as most governmental units would if they were in that situation. So a surplus isn't a surplus once we get beyond that operating capital we need for those months. So you can see it on the back. We're looking at proposed, it's 2.5 per year, goes to 1.5 in 22, and then 0 in 23, with a actual financial plan on how to use that money to manage this, so we can start taking those big steps forward and not interfund borrowing anymore as well. So we have a plan, we're executing it, it's working faster than we thought it would. And then going forward, we're gonna have other contingency plans, because if revenue models change, we need to be able to adapt to that as well. And so we have to know what to do when that happens. So is that a decent summary, Steve? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any questions about that? No. You know, for Steve or me? Because we've been going through this process of back and forth, what financial model, Steve Lear's been part of that. What financial model look good, get a larger TAW and pay highway back quicker, you know, then you have more in interest, so that doesn't make sense. So, you know, I just want to make sure there's no questions about the thought process of why we did what we did, or proposing to do, and asking the board to codify.
Seeing no questions.
Yeah, as far as the flow, we will have the official proposals for you next month at this committee, and then it'll go on to the February full board, and then it usually takes a little over a week after the full board to get all the paperwork and everything done, and then for the closing approximately on February 21st, as we indicated. So we just wanted to lay out the dollar amount, the split between the banks. The interest rate is the same, and the repayment terms are the same, other than the change of dates, you know, from one year to the other. and what the estimated interest costs are, for this financing. And then this is the information that you have is what we shared with the banks. What's happened here is basically a summary of what, how it's affecting flow. We paid down the AP. We had a lot of major capital improvements that both things that emergency items and things that have been discussed throughout the year. And then, taking a look, where the cash on hand actually is, the status of that. It's very similar, even though this was done in October when we met with our bankers. The numbers are very similar today that they were, and you can see, general fund wise, just 2 years ago, the general fund had a negative fund balance, or cash balance, cash on hand balance as of October 28, 2016 of negative $7.2 million. And fast forward 2 years to October 25th, 2018, a negative 3.4. So significant change, but also we still have a ways to go as well. And we also have to keep that in mind, that as we've gained on this, things improve, but it's still a very much a cash flow balancing act, and we're heading into the time of the year that we have to watch it the most is really between December, January, and through May to June area, and that is outlined in the FY19. The cash flow analysis for that laid out from December to November. And you can see the asterisk months are 3 payroll months. You can see April will be, after the 3 payrolls in March, will be probably the toughest month to keep an eye on. That we'll have to watch everything very closely. But these, even though that's it drops to 2.3 in previous years, some of you may remember, we were dropping below $1 million in a lot of these estimates, and there were times that the actual cash in this particular account 10122, there were many times after a payroll that we were less than $200,000 in that account, within 2 weeks needing another 1.1 million to be able to cover the next payroll. So they were extremely tight, and times going through the early stage that we're talking the March, April, May area when that happened. So to see that we'll potentially still be above 2 million is that's actually a breath of fresh air compared to some of the previous years and what we've been through. So we're still keeping an eye on it because we still have to. But yeah, significant improvements, but we still have the due diligence, with balancing cash. So, and as we go forward, the projects and cash flow, we're reminding department heads, that during this time, springtime, wintertime, springtime, to put off large, purchases if possible. Sometimes repairs don't allow you to, something breaks, sometimes things happen, but if we have a choice, it's still important to put those off, as we have discussed in previous years. So, so this gives you the background, the highlight information of our discussion, and like I said, we'll have the official documentation to begin this next month at next finance and under the February board. So I don't know if there's any other questions.
Are there questions in regard to cash flow? For the new members of the board, you may be familiar with it from other organizations been part of, but clearly the cash flow issue is one that can be something that you have to pay close attention to, because it is a matter that changes from month to month depending upon revenue. If there are no other questions on that, we'll move to the next item. We have before us claims recommended and not recommended for approval. What's the pleasure of the committee in regard to these? Mr. Wheeler?
I'd make the motion that we
approve these, even though they're not filled out correctly. There's no vendor on the first form. Instead of being petty and rejecting the claim and make it go back through the process again, instead of rejecting this because there's no vendor on the form, we'll go ahead and send it, and not sending it back through the process. I'd say we approve it to expedite and be courteous to our fellow department heads.
A motion to approve, is there a second? Mr. Payton seconds, is there any further discussion? Hearing no further instruction, all in favor of approving, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Just, if I could ask a point of clarification for both claims for the approval, both claims. So pretty clear on that.
That's for both claims then. All right, moving on. We have a resolution that it's going to be presented to the full board. We don't have the specifics in front of us right now, but Mr. Chairman, could you speak to that a little?
Yeah, make sure I've got the right information in front of me.
This is the resolution authorizing the county board
Right.
chairman to approve claim payments before final consideration of the finance committee.
Sure, this came as a request. Mr. Hess made it, and it's in the ongoing matters of emphasis in the auditor's monthly report. This keeps coming up that I don't have the authority to approve the claims before they are actually paid. So this was to satisfy that requirement, even though we approve the lump sum budgets for all departments and we oversee spending. We don't control spending within those elected departments. We still have that oversight, and this board will still see all of those claims that come through and can question anything they want and should question anything that looks improper. But in this case, in order to keep the cash moving, in the past, we have had small subgroups of the finance committee come meet with the chairman and the finance director to prioritize these. And this was a long time ago. They said, look, you guys know what's going on. You know where all the balls are in the air. Why don't you just handle it for us? So this is an attempt to codify that and satisfy the continual commentary that I don't have the authority to do that, even though this board does approve. And I think we do have the authority. This board does approve the lump sum budget. We do not have the micromanagement authority over elected department heads' budget line items. But we can call out something we see as wasteful. And you know what? We do have the hammer, which is to change their budget. If we think they're wasting money, we can change their budget for the current and the following year. So I just want to remind the board that we currently have that authority and should use it if we see necessary. So that's the general thing. Our all-star state's attorney in the civil division, who usually does these things, is on a beach somewhere. So he has said that he has said that he will be putting this on paper when he gets back, and already started. He just didn't have it before he left at the beginning of the week. So
from my perspective, I think it's important for us to say, as a legislative body, we have an important role in establishing policy, and we have an important role in terms of setting the overall budget. Our oversight responsibility comes not in the sense of control, but of calling attention to expenditures that we think there is a need to have some attention brought to, and this is an important aspect of what we do, but it doesn't mean we control those expenditures. We simply have the responsibility to draw attention to those cases where we think there needs to be some further awareness of what is going on. And certainly we want every board member first to speak directly to department heads when spending is going on, so they can learn what is the rationale behind the expenditure and the basis of the expenditure, and then feel free to call attention to those expenditures that you think the public needs to be aware of, even though our action's not going to lead to our controlling when the person is a separately elected public official. County government's a little complex, and even having a master's degree in political science, sometimes I have to stop and remind myself, okay, our style is a little bit different than the style of a town or a village, and our structure is different. So that's all part of what the learning process is for each of us.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, are the roll call mics on? We're getting a hum out here. Or other microphones, because we're getting feedback. I just wanted to see.
Okay, I think the guest microphone was on.
Okay.
Maybe.
And to that point, I appreciate that explanation, because it's different than a city. City doesn't have other elected department heads, because that comment keeps coming up in the city. In the city, we do. In the city, well, we're not the city, we're the county. There's other statutes that apply, and we don't have power to control beyond what we already control with the budget. So thank you for those comments.
Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I'm asked about the role of the county board, I mean, I simply say we are basically a budgetary oversight committee. I mean, really, that's what we do. We oversee the budgets of elected officials and appointed departments and ensure that the county services are properly funded and the money spent properly for the taxpayer.
Thank you. Mr. Washington.
I kind of disagree. I believe that we're elected to these positions to monitor, to set regulations, and to make sure that those regulations are carried out. That includes the budget and everything else. We are the final standard for making sure that the funds are expended the way that they should be spent. That's, to me, control is not a bad word. It's what we have to do in order to spend the monies that are collected from the members of this county, the people of this county.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? This will come before then the full board at the January meeting.
Recommendation, Mr. Chairman, it would need to be voted on here as the finance is passing on the recommendation to allow that pending state's attorney, and then they will be able to vote on it at the full board
All
approval.
right, Mr. Hess is making the motion. Mr. Hess makes that motion. Mr. Washington seconds. This is a motion to approve this resolution pending the state's attorney's completion of the material.
Yes.
Ms. Weber.
Well, looking at the minutes, will the motion include, or the resolution include paying payroll and travel reimbursements, credit cards? Will it specifically say what items can be paid ahead?
In order to make this as appropriate as possible, it would not list specific items, but would refer to the authority in a more general fashion. Mr. Wheeler?
The only distinction that I was intending to draw, and the state's attorney has yet to respond to this, is that it would have to go on through the audit process. We can't just have a bill show up at my desk and I say pay it. It has to go through the entire process and then be ready and approved for payment, if that makes sense. So typically, I don't want to hold employees' travel reimbursement for a month and a half while it goes through a process. But we will hold it if the auditor disagrees that doesn't have the proper substantiation. And I hope that clarifies. We're not going to subvert the role of the auditor in this process, but once that's done, we sit there with a stack because our computer operates in such a way, and Steve can explain this a little bit better. You can't just have everything sitting in the computer in a queue because it shuts the computer down. So what we do is we're able to process when we have the money to pay it. And so a lot of this is a cash management, a cash flow situation where we talk with Mr. Lear, with Anita, we work with Steve to figure out, okay, this is what we have. These are the priorities. We got to get insurance. Payroll's an automatic. Credit cards are an automatic. We have to pay. Insurances, utilities, we can't have those turned off. But then we have all of those other things that come through on a monthly basis that are under the purview of those elected department heads that we do not micromanage. Again, to Mr. Washington's point, we should have commentary, and if we think it's wasteful, we can address that in a budget, and we should. But that's not the role of the finance committee, is to say, you shouldn't be buying doors for the jail. We should say, you just bought them last year, why'd you do it again? Maybe we don't need it in the budget for next year. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Anything more you have?
No, so there's any other questions?
Are there any other questions for Mr. McCarty? If not, we'll move on to the Sheriff's Department. You have the monthly report of the Sheriff's Department in front of you.
He has a monthly update and he was not able to attend today. So he asked me just to move on to the declaration of surplus equipment.
All right, so no monthly update then.
Nope.
Declaration of surplus equipment is in your packet. Is there a motion to approve the declaration of surplus? Mr. Byrne moves. Is there a second? Mr. Olthoff seconds. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the declaration say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We move to the resolution from the chairman in terms of the agreement with Alfred G. Ronan Ltd. We heard a presentation, many of you did, in the executive committee already. Mr. Wheeler, do you want to make a few additional comments?
Well, just to clarify the terms, it's 1 year, it's $5,000 a month for the year, and it would not be renewed until it comes back to this, committee and then to the full board. So if anybody that wasn't here had any questions about the services, I do have the contract in front of me. I'd asked them to bring a copy, but it will be as part of the packet for the full board as well. So,
Ms. Weber.
I wondered if in the agreement, does it say if I work really, really hard, you'll give me an extra 2,000, or does it say?
Give me a moment, please. If it did, I would strike it. This board would make that choice.
Mr. Altoff?
The sheriff's equipment surplus, I know we have to have a voice vote for spending money. Do we have to have a voice vote for throwing it away?
I don't think a roll call is required for surplus.
Yeah.
That's not what you said, but yeah, you meant that.
Never mind.
No, that was an appropriate question. This is my first time chairing a committee for quite a while, and I may have forgotten something. So I appreciate people helping me out. There are occasions where I'm going to need it, I'm sure. So we go back to the resolution. Is there a motion on this resolution so that we can discuss it? Is then motion to approve? Motion to approve authorizing resolution for the county board chair sign an agreement with Alfred G. Ronan Ltd. Is there a second? Ms. Parkhurst, any discussion on the motion? Not Parkhurst, Parker. Oh, boy. I told you I was going to need help. Yeah. Told you I need help. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Weber?
Just wondered the time, what's the effective date? 12/1, okay.
Excuse me, 1/1 to 12/31, sorry.
1/1. Any other questions? We're spending money this time, so it will be a roll call.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Olthoff?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Zenz?
Aye.
Ms. Huss? Mr. Swanson? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
We move to the auditor's office. Mr. Lee doesn't seem to be here right now, but you have the monthly claims that have been submitted to you, that report. So we need a motion to approve the monthly claims report. Mr. Payton moves. Mr. Wheeler seconds. Any discussion on the monthly claims report?
Mr. Chairman, it's a motion to accept the report, not to approve it. It's just a motion to accept. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll speak to its
Motion to
validity.
accept the report. If there's no discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have on the agenda cash bonus mandated by the auditor to be paid to the auditor office employee.
pleasure teeing this up. Everybody has a copy of the email. I don't have the luxury of looking at semantics and determining what the intent of is. I have to look at the direction, and I was directed via that email to, at the time, pay out $1,750 to, that was the total at the time, to an employee of the auditor's office, because he said he came in under budget. So the email is there. Everybody has a chance to see it. I don't have the authority to question, as my research and initial thoughts were proven correct by the state's attorney's office, so I had to react. And so at this point, that mandate still stands. And apparently, I don't know from public comment what that means. That, are we not supposed to act on it, or we are now? There was no clarification, so I'm still in the position of saying that's what I've been instructed to do by the auditor. I think it's pretty clear to this committee, and you can make up your own mind what the intent of that email was. I have extra money in my budget. I want to use interfund borrowed money to give to my employee who agreed on the pay that they were going to get paid by the county. By the way, they knew what they were getting paid by the county, and that didn't include a bonus of interfund borrowed taxpayer money. So you may call it marketing on the way it was titled. I tried to be as clear as I possibly could, because in order for it to be on the agenda, it has to be specific. It was up to this committee to know that I can't stop that through policy. Okay, whatever, as we talked about before. So it was a chance for Mr. Lee to explain that action. I find his explanation to be disingenuous from what happened before. I think his attempt to walk everything back when it's clear what was in that email. And to me, I think it's the most egregious waste of taxpayer money I've seen since I've been here. There is no public purpose to this. If we can't buy flowers for a sheriff's department retiree who passes away, but we can give an employee a bonus of taxpayer money that we have to interfund borrow, it makes no sense to me. And so that's why I had to bring it to the committee, just to let them know. And obviously, you know where we're at.
Mr. Altoff.
In the light of other departments, being this a precedent, can I make a motion to reject this request?
I think that motion be out of order because we don't have the legal authority.
Is that what the state's attorney said?
That is what the state's attorney has informed us, yes.
What's going forward? Do we make a change in policy, or this is locked in?
We changed the policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We changed the policy in the executive committee meeting, and that will hopefully be approved at the full board level. But just like the flower policy, elected officials can go outside of that. They're not bound by our policy and procedure handbook. So there is nothing that we can do from a policy standpoint. So like if the state's attorney came in $100,000 over budget or under budget, which I welcome, by the way, don't get me wrong. He could technically hand out $5,000 bonuses to all of his employees if he wanted to, if that equaled the amount of money. We had our situation where our coroner came in $80,000 under budget, and he didn't go out and buy a bunch of stuff with it. He gave it back to the county. I'm floored, and many department heads are floored that this even came up. It's so against really what's moral with taxation and the public use of money. So,
I think our planning department came in under budget.
Yeah, and they brought in more revenue than
they're wondering about their bonuses.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem we're in right now. But again, planning is part of administration. I can stop that with a policy and a procedure. And so I apologize, Dell and everybody down there. Well, I don't apologize. It's not right. So.
Okay,
Mr. Byrne.
never mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was gonna ask the auditor if the employee was aware of the salary they accepted. Well, I mean, I've taken jobs and I work in the private sector, and I take what I get. I don't expect any more. And I was gonna bring up the coroner in criminal justice last week, stated he saved the county $80,000, and it went back. It was none of, well, I'm gonna split this up. I mean, again, it's taxpayer money. This isn't the private sector where that happens. It's frequent. Bonuses can be if a business owner decides to spend that out. But we are a tax-funded government entity, nonprofit. I worked for a nonprofit hospital. I worked at a local hospital and did sales and marketing, generated quite a bit of revenue. I didn't see any bonus money from it.
Mr. Kissinger?
I will, thank you, Mr. Chairman. and I'm probably using the wrong word, and you may know the right word, but I would like to see an informational motion adopted by roll call vote in this committee expressing the displeasure that we have with this type of performance.
I would
don't know if it's
turn
in
to
order.
the chairman whether that would be in order or not.
I'm sorry, it's not on the agenda, so it's not in order, but I think we will have an opportunity in a moment to voice that displeasure with some other action we can take. We can basically do a head nod. I mean, you know, that this is not it's not on the agenda. I think
Not
the
on the
tone is,
agenda.
I don't think there's anybody here that supports it.
Because it's not
Yeah.
on the agenda. It would
It's
be
not on the
in order.
agenda. So, you know, I do want to say one other thing, because this really took me back here. Under no circumstances would I ever discriminate against any employee. And I don't think I have the authority or the purview to take up the mantle for gender discrimination. And I thought that was way out of hand, because this employee, who does, as far as I know, good work, was hired knowing what she was going to make. She agreed to that pay. And to assume that to say that I am discriminating against this employee is offensive, but I am not going to speak for other women. I will let them determine if that hurts the cause of equal opportunity in employment.
Mr. Washington.
I had this too. That employee, regardless of her qualifications, she knew what she was getting when she started. That's one of the founding principles of hiring someone. You tell them what to expect when they start. You don't bring them in and say, well, it just depends on what you do or how you perform. It doesn't matter about their qualifications. They accept the position for what they're told that they will get paid.
Mr. Wheeler.
Just remember, this board approved a budget increase for the auditor's office so this employee could get more money. Because we realized that even though they're making what the other employee made, that we wanted to recognize good work, but it wasn't a bonus. It was in next year's budget. So I just want to make sure everybody know that we gave a little bit more money to that employee, so it's not like we're heartless and cruel and discriminating. I mean, I just, man.
All right, so unless Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Chairman. The auditor's not here, but I have a little problem with this letter that he also sent out with his claims report in here. If anybody has any of this, it's what he sent out by email. One of them is, we noted there was 2 claims submitted for polo shirts that were considered uniforms. I happen to know a little bit about this, and I think they saved the county about $100 and some by getting the polo shirts and have them embroidered themselves. But number 2, it says, we noted that several departments have ordered coffee, plasticware, and other personal items under object code, the account 5680 office supplies. We respectively request that every department that expends funds, public funds for such items would provide a memorandum for the record to the auditor's office certifying that such expenditures are primarily for general public use and consumption, not personal consumption by employees and elected officials. Where are we going? And then we have 3 and 4. And number 4 says, the auditor's office was constructively abolished illegitimately, well, I can't even pronounce that, and we continue to recommend that the office restored to where it belongs by state law. Now, I believe I've asked the state's attorney's office twice if we've done anything illegal or anything like that, and they have said no. Why do we keep getting letters like this in our packet?
Mr. Wheeler.
Just as a comment for administration, I buy the water personally, I buy the coffee. A claim went through on coffee that I grabbed because it got billed through Quill and paid it myself. I paid for the flowers for a funeral and had sent an email to board members if they want to start to pass the hat. So I'm not sure exactly what department that was about. It was probably another gotcha situation or victimization statement. Now I will speak to the polos. That kind of took me back a little bit, because these polos don't say Bob Gessner, I'm the greatest coroner ever. They say Kankakee County Coroner because they go to crime scenes and they need to be easily identifiable. And to say that there's an IRS violation because they're getting swag, I mean, when the IRS raids somebody, does it say on the back, you know, whoever the head of the IRS is with their picture? No, it says IRS. Do they have to claim that on their taxes? I don't know where, to Mr. Hess's point, I don't know where all this is going. I mean, this is just, we see claims rejected because there's a penny rounding error, so it doesn't come through to the committee, it gets submitted back. Instead of the phone getting picked up and called and say, hey, you made a mistake, can I attach an email to this that says, your email saying go ahead and correct it? We have to go through the whole process, it comes through the whole committee, and it's turned our finance department into a role of being the errand boy for the auditing process, which we're going to address in a later meeting. So,
Are there other comments or questions? If not, we'll move on to other business. The Route 50 corridor proposal has already been discussed, and are there any other additional questions on that or comments? If not, I think, Mr. Byrne?
Just a quick comment. It's in my district, and it's exciting things. There's a lot of exciting things going on in the county, and as the representative in that area, it's looking forward to seeing the progress.
Next, we'd move to fiscal year 2018 budget amendments. Okay, here comes your handout. Mr. Wheeler?
The reason that we're handing out the budget, we wanted to wait until the last possible moment to see what claims were processed through the auditor's office, because in his email he mentioned that there's, claims could be coming in. So as we go through this process, I wanted to make sure at the last possible moment we had the best information for when we amend his FY18 budget.
So you have the amendments.
Is Mr. McCarty still here?
Yes, Mr. McCarty.
Steve, if you could explain some of these special fund amendments and why we do these. You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, the Fund 065, you want me, oh,
Yeah, but that mic's on.
every mic in here probably pick up my voice. Fund 065 is funds through the Will County project that we did, and has been used for capital and emergency repairs and capital improvements. With the scope and through the projects that have been approved through the course of the year, we needed to raise that budget up to include all of those. We had some retro pay through a couple union contracts and through payouts and some retirements, which affected pensions and the two circuit clerk related items, and then the Fed task force, that's federal seizure money, and we're just making sure that with the scope of what the sheriff determines the use on that, that also to make sure the budget matches up to that for reporting purposes and for those items as well. So that's a brief overview. If anybody has any questions.
Seeing no questions.
The next item.
Next item.
The next item, as mentioned, we don't have policy oversight over elected department heads, but our oversight is on the lump sum budgets. And as I said, wait till later. This is what our later is. This is in front of you is I was instructed to use what's left in the budget to give as a cash payout to the auditor's employee. At the time, right now, it's $521.31. And so what I'm asking for the budget amendment for FY18 is to not make that shortage available to be given out, to amend the budget to 105 $778.69, which is our estimated year end. And then that money will go where it should have gone, is to reduce our debt. Because this is borrowed money, so I don't think it's right, and I think we all agree it's not good to borrow money to pay a bonus to somebody. So it goes into the debt reduction fund. So that's all want to make sure the committee knows that that's how we handle things when we find that there's waste of taxpayer dollars.
Any questions, discussion on the budget amendments? We need a motion to approve the budget amendments. Mr. Kissinger moves to approve the budget amendments. Is there a second? Mr. Washington seconds the motion. Discussion on the budget amendments. Hearing no discussion, we'll need a roll call vote on that?
Yes.
We'll need a roll call vote on that.
Mr. Lear? Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Olthoff? Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Zenz?
Aye.
Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we move to outside audit of 2017-18 credit card payments. Mr. Wheeler?
Yes, this item is on the agenda because you may remember that we had through 17 and 18, we did, there was amassed fees and late charges because the credit card bills were not being paid properly or they were not being received properly by Chase. That has yet to be determined. The auditor's office was not able to provide any proof that it was Chase's fault, even though that was the assertion. And accountants don't speak like that. Accountants go with facts and they go with numbers. And so we have, because of accountability and transparency, we now have to spend money to find out why we had to pay that money. It seems ridiculous, but all this is what we have to do because the public needs to know exactly where the error was made. So we have contracted or have in front of us to contract. It's up to $3,500. It could be less. We have to audit all of the credit card statements and bills from 17 and 18. And then we also have to audit the clearing account, which is where all of those go at one time. And then we do joint journal vouchers to allocate those expenses to the departments. So it's a little bit of accounting, and I don't want to really go through that, but we have to basically audit that whole process so we can go back to Chase and say, you owe us more money, or to find out where the process broke down, because it was, the dog ate my homework is not the best answer. Accountants don't talk like that. So we want to make sure that we go through this process to do it the right way. And that's our job, to do it this way. So that's why I brought it to the committee to authorize the up to the $3,500. And if it's more, then we'll bring that back to the committee.
Let's get a motion first. Is there a motion to approve the audit for these payments? Ms. Parker? Mr. Payton seconds. All right, we have a motion on the table now, Mr. Kissinger.
Is this audit required, or are we doing this audit to continue this strife? And the reason I ask is because sometimes the amount of money that we lost, we're gonna spend it again proving who was right or wrong, and we gained nothing. Just doubled the loss.
Mr. Wheeler?
I think that while it may seem like that on the surface, this is part of our outside audit that would get dove into deeper. When you start talking about some of these credit cards purchase things that were under grants, this part gets looked at and does every single year. And we have found things that were done inappropriately in the past. So this is all part of that process. A byproduct of it is to be able to find out where the problem is. Is there something we're doing wrong? Is there something Chase is doing wrong? Because I actually agree with the auditor. We had a horrible couple years with Chase on getting our cards hacked before we even received the new cards. So it could be on them. But just to say it's their fault with no statistical backup, I mean, we have spent thousands of dollars on doing internal audits on things that have employees over $10 on a reimbursement on a hamburger because it's gone all the way around. I mean, it's stuff like that we do all the time that you don't see that comes through this process. So I will say that accountability and transparency dictate to find out why we spent the $2,000, even though we got to spend up to $3,500 to find out. I apologize. It's just.
Kissinger.
Couldn't this be part of the scheduled audit that we have with our present accountant?
We have asked that, and I don't know if Anita's still here, but this is a more detailed situation because on the surface, they get more detailed as they find errors. Don't get me wrong, it's a very detailed outside audit. This is specific to that clearing account and all of the credit card bills. Our outside audit deals with $50–60 million worth of all the things that we do. And so when they find something that's like, okay, well, this is a problem in their test, then they go dig deep and hard. And we have to jump through a lot of hoops, and sometimes the answer is not what we want it to be, is for the county, but the auditors find the outside auditors do their job. So I wished it could be part of that, much like our changeover audits, that when an elected department changes, we have to have an audit on that, which the auditor correctly identified that we weren't doing. And I don't know that we ever did at the county. I had to spend $20,000 to have those performed by an outside company because we didn't have at the time a CPA that could do it in-house or that had the ability to do in-house because they would have been one of the people that were audited. So in this case, it is kind of what it is. And it's unfortunate. I don't want to do it, but the public demands to know if you pay your credit cards when they're due, you have no fees. So what happened? That's the question. And then why is the clearing account, why did that not balance? That will be found in the outside audit. And I know more about accounting than I ever thought I wanted to be honest, after the last couple of years. But
Any other questions or discussion? Ms. Weber?
I would think if the auditing firm finds the discrepancies, it'd be a lot easier to convince Chase to give us the money back. I would think that it would have the documentation needed, so why not?
Other questions or discussion? Mr. Altoff?
Sorry to drag this out, but we've had instances with our own credit card where there was a discrepancy and stuff, and they refunded us. And Chase has not offered to do that.
he said that Chase has not offered to give us refunds. They did write off some of it. But I don't have the exact amounts, but we ended up still paying, I think, a couple grand over the last couple years of taxpayer money. So $2,600, yeah. So that's why we have to find out what happened and where the breakdown is. Because if we got a problem with our process on anybody's side, we need to fix it.
Yeah.
Other questions or discussion? Mr. Alton?
Can you get auto pay?
No.
That's what we do to avoid anything. But
I believe our EFT capabilities were taken away once our credit rating or debt got so bad that the banks pulled that from us.
Got it.
So we have to be creditworthy in order to have EFT. Cross your fingers. This year, I'm hoping for Moody's will treat us kindly.
Mr. Hess?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the minutes again now from November 28th, and Mr. Lee stated they tried to do online payments, but Chase wanted access to our bank accounts. That's why they stopped the online payment.
Other questions or comments? This is spending money, so we need a roll call vote.
Mr. Lear? Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Olthoff?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Zenz? Ms. Haas? Mr. Swanson? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next item, every 2 years, we need to establish a certification or recertification for the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund eligibility for the chairman and vice chairman. This is something that is required by their system, and so we're going to need a motion to do that. Mr. Altoff moves. Mr. Worston seconds. Is there any discussion on this? Ms. Weber?
Just questioning the dates again. Does it start January 1 through 2 years?
I would suspect it's based on our fiscal year, maybe.
Fiscal. 12/1. It has to be done within 90 days of election.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, now, as I understand it, does require on the part of the chairman and the vice chairman meeting a standard in terms of hours of participation. So clearly the chairman's going to make that. The vice chairman will depend upon his keeping adequate records in. All right. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Roll call? All right.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Olthoff? Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Mr. Zenz?
Aye.
Ms. Haas? Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And one other item, Mr. Wheeler, you wanted to call something in regard to the circuit clerk?
Oh, thank you for reminding, because I knew I forget. I'm glad you wrote it down. I received a call from the circuit clerk, and we were talking about a few things, and something that Mike check.
Bliss.
I received a call from circuit clerk regarding, we're talking about some other things, but this came up. She has, you may know that we built in the budget that we were going to be able to allow them to rehire or fill, positions that have been open since the budget crash, if you will. And that was going to be when we got out of the hole. That's what we had said for the sheriff's department. They could put a couple people back. We'll put a maintenance guy out at the jail. What we have is a situation where she has 2 people off on FMLA and a third getting ready to go. And so I told her that, I said, you tell me you have to have this or else we shut courtrooms down. And if she wants to speak to that, please. That's why I told her to come here, even though it's not on the agenda. She wanted to make you aware of what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. That's true. One of the FMLA though is not going to pursue that, but still, it's been, we are working with our hands tied behind our back. Our minute clerks that go to court, I have one that still has work from September to get done. We have a lot of mandates where we're supposed to have information passed on, like the convictions and things are supposed to be passed on in 5 days, and we're like months behind. So, for us to really catch up, we would require a lot more people, but if we can start with the 2 people that we were granted that we could fill and get those positions moving. We also have coming up in the spring, when everybody gets their tax money, they voluntarily come in and pay their debt, their tickets and whatnot. And when they do that, we have to give them their releases for so that they could take them back to the Secretary of State. And like with the amnesty program that we just did, and we had those, several hundred payments that were made, each one of those tickets required all that work to get them the paperwork to take back to the Secretary of State. So we have a lot of work, and we're just falling behind, and it's hard for us. I'm working the order protection counter a lot of times. The chief deputy is filling in is everywhere that she can, and she's not getting her work done, and I'm not getting my work done. So we just would really, I'm going to go ahead and post those right after the first of the year so that we can get moving, because the training takes a long time and we're just worn out. We're just tired, and with all the new cases that are always being filed and things, it's just hard to keep up. So thank you. And I also wanted to say too that I am a department head and elected official, that I pay for my own conferences out of my own pocket. The only thing that I submit to the county to pay for is the registration for these conferences. I never ask for mileage. I never ask for the reimbursement for the rooms. And I go to conferences 3 times a year. So I do make personal sacrifices for my office so that I can have the staff, so that the money can be budgeted for staff. So when I say that we are behind, we are really behind, and I really would appreciate the assistance and the help. Thank you.
All right, I see the committee doing a number of head nods, so I think we understand this situation and support it. I think the coroner's office maybe had something. No? I thought you signaled. Oh, it's treasurer. Okay. Mr. Africano?
I forgot one thing, and I probably said enough already today, but I just wanted to say, as someone who witnessed it on the front lines, Anita's health signups were so efficient this year, and my employees loved it, and that's all I've heard on the first floor, how great it was, and I think it's important to recognize that and tell her thank you.
Mr. Altough.
At this late hour, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
There is a motion to adjourn. Mr. Hess seconds the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.